Hello, everybody. Welcome to the broadcast. My name is David Snedeker. I am glad that you're joining us this evening. This is what I consider to be a very special evening, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you this evening, along with Todd and Cindy, and some information that we've come across, some information that you've come across. And I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit about just what I've been thinking about with everything that's happening. Okay, we have about 1,100 beautiful humans in the theater here tonight. Excuse me, and over across 4 platforms, we've been deplatformed off Facebook for live streaming. We've just recently got back on YouTube for live streaming, but I'm on my 3rd strike, so the next strike and we're done on that particular channel. So I'd ask you to please reach out, support Twitch, support DLive. I'm on the IndoctriNATION on both of those, and also the Dave Sned YouTube. I have 0 strikes on that because I wasn't putting any information on there. So that's our backup channel. A big shout out to Scott at the Tipping Point, Scott McKay, who was deplatformed again off YouTube. Why? Because the things that he is saying, the things that I am saying, the things that X22 report are saying, the things that so many have said, Brian High Impact Flicks, are downright dangerous to those who mean to control us. You don't have to go any deeper than that. Okay? It's not some big conspiracy. It's not some, you guys incite violence, or you know, I've never incited violence. Most of these people have never even, they don't believe violence is the way to the successful revolution, and neither do I. So any thought of inciting violence is a manufactured construct by the mainstream media in order to demonize those of us who challenge the status quo, challenge the mainstream media, challenge those that are lying to us every single day. And so, just here's an offer to Scott, to Dave, to Brian, anybody that's been deplatformed on any platform that has that wants to get their information out. You're welcome on our broadcast. We go nightly, 6:15 Pacific Standard Time. Normally it's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, but we've gone many days in a row lately because we absolutely feel like we are in this revolution, and we are at the height of the revolution right now. And I want to talk a little bit about that. And Todd and I will talk a little bit about more about it later as well. Cheers, everybody. Come on in. Grab your, check your coat. If you're new here, welcome. We have a little process we do where we call it checking our coat, and all we're doing is imagining that you're coming in off the cold street and you're going to enjoy an evening with other over 1,200 beautiful people, and you're not going to wear your big bulky winter coat. You're going to take it off. You're going to check it at the coat check, get a claim ticket. But we just imagine all our preconceived notions and our ego, our unconscious bias. We imagine that in that coat, so that when we take that off and we check it, it's safe. We can come back to it at any time, any of our beliefs, any of our feelings, any of our ego. We can come back to that. But the whole idea is checking that so that you can come on in and be open mind, open heart to information that may or may not serve you. And then at the end, you can go get your coat, and take what you want. Some people just grab a few things out of the pockets. Some people leave them all together. We got a stack of coats piling up. And it's because once you release that, once you allow that to be just set aside for a moment, and you don't feel like you have to have your dukes up here, you don't have to have your speech, ready to roll on certain topics, you're not going to be attacked here. You're open to express your First Amendment right, unlike many platforms, but we just ask you to be respectful. Open mind, be kind. And that way it creates an environment where we can all kind of download some information and learn a little bit about what's really going on. Because there is no question about it. My extensive research over the past 14 years has directed me to a place of absolute realization of that we are living in a matrix of sorts that operates most efficiently with our consent, with our apathy. It operates best with our complicity in the operations that may have been masked or sold to us as beneficial to you and I, but in actuality are beneficial to people that we don't even know their names, or if we know their names, we don't even know who they are, nor would we have an opportunity to sit down and find out who they are. Because the people that I'm speaking of have literally called humanity useless eaters. Okay? They've called us sheep. They've called us chattel. They have enslaved us. So they've also called us slaves. But the greatest trick that they ever accomplished was enslaving an entire civilization without that civilization even realizing that they've been enslaved. And so we are on this journey together, and in order for them to keep us from fighting against them and taking them down and just walking away from that which gives them power, they instigate us so that we fight against each other instead of against them. My 14 years of research of people that have come before me, gone before me, for those who have passed, William Cooper, Jordan Maxwell, to sages like Jiddu Krishnamurti, Alan Watts, George Carlin, people, Bill Hicks. These are just a sampling of the people that I have listened to and studied. G. Edward Griffin, the creature from Jekyll Island, about the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank, which enslaved us in the 20th century. Behold a Pale Horse by Bill Cooper. The Franklin Cover-Up by Kathy O'Brien, of mind control and pedophilia in Boys Town in Lincoln, Nebraska, and all around the world. These are the kind of things that I have spent time with over these past 14 years. And in order to get a concept of thinking outside the box, what was necessary was for me to go outside the box. The box being the television, the box being the computer at times, the box being our devices, which have us absolutely addicted and enslaved to for many, many hours per day. And so taking this step outside the box allows us to free our mind a bit and see the world through different eyes, but mainly through the eyes of people who have come and gone before us, who have experienced things that they won't talk about on CNN, ABC, CBS, CNBC, late night talk shows, daytime soap operas, morning drive time radio, the Sunday morning New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, Chicago Tribune. These are all organizations owned by 5 families in the United States. And from a 1975 church commission in front of Congress, where we discovered that the CIA had 400 assets in mainstream media in the 60s and 70s. This has not changed, folks. They still have a firm grasp on mainstream media. And the best part of 2020 was the absolute clarity of vision that we received 2020, that the masses received. I have spoken to hundreds of thousands of people just in the past 2 years alone. And the countless number of people that have awakened through this truthcast, the amount of people that have awakened through other truthcasts, other newsletters, other podcasts, has been greater in the past year than ever before in human history. And it took an absurd event and the absurd decisions that were being made around that event and the loss of freedom that we experienced around that event and the absolute just incredulous nature in which people have enslaved themselves around this event, and how this event led to an election which anyone in their right mind, or certainly anyone in their left mind, because the left mind is where your analytical analysis is of a situation. Your right mind, your right brain that's reactionary. That's emotion, right? That is passion. That is feelings. Left brain, analytical, logical, reasoning. So anybody in their left brain can see that this election, there were many, many, many things that just didn't make sense to a cognitive thinker, to a free thinker. But what was also very, very, much exposed in this process was the fact of so many that continued along this indoctrination path of mind enslavement, mind control, without even realizing that they are. And so what we're about to experience on this planet is a continuation of the Great Awakening. And we don't know when, we don't know how, we don't know who. And as much as we have tried to get to the bottom of when and how and who, so that we can better navigate tomorrow, the next day, the day after that, there's one thing that is very, very clear to me, and that is that the truth can no longer be buried. That through this great awakening, no matter what happens tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that, they can never take the truth away from you and me. Because once our minds have expanded into free thinking, we'll never go back to being indoctrinated again. We've seen how absolutely mesmerizing it is. We understand the power of the drip, 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 constant and persistent indoctrination being spoon-fed to the masses, and the masses lapping it up like Pavlov's dog, just awaiting the next piece of information from a master that does not serve them, but the master serves themselves. We have awakened to this reality that no longer will we lap from the voice, from this spoon of a master that is self-serving and not out to help serve humanity. And even if we do find that person that we feel is truthful, that we feel is integrous, we must not allow ourselves to fall prey to allowing the information and the formation of opinion without the work, without the research, without the challenging of that information, in order to exercise our brain, exercise our mind, in order to keep us free. I say this because I no longer want us to be focused or concerned on events having to transpire when we think they are, or when we've been told they are, but to just think freely about the fact that it will happen. You see, as much as we've tried to predict when, every time we've felt like we know when and how, we are humbled because we don't see it all. As much as I see, as much as I know, as much as Todd knows, as much as the snedheads know out there that are doing real research, we know a small fraction of the big picture here. And so the key for humanity here, in my opinion, is the fact that we will not go back to being spoon-fed information, and that we will seek out our information and challenge what we are seeing. This show that we've been exposed to, this show that we have been told to enjoy by 17, is to show humanity just how far we've fallen. That is the goal here, is to show humanity that what we have been exposed to have been lies to support and protect those who have done horrible, unspeakable things to the most innocent of us all. This will come out. This realization is coming out. And the people that are aware of this tragedy already are going to struggle with the reality of it when it's exposed. Imagine how those who have argued for, voted for, disowned you for, disrespected you for. Think about how those people are going to feel when the reality, the truth, is exposed. And I will tell you this, that no matter what happens, the people that are being silenced right now will grow stronger. The people who are being censored by big tech, by mainstream media, the people who have been discredited by mainstream media, in the eyes of those still trapped within the matrix, are getting stronger. We are growing. We are growing into new platforms. And I will tell you this, that the number of awake people doing podcasts and doing YouTube channels and doing Brighteon and doing Rumble and doing all these platforms and doing shows and talking to you about the things that they're discovering, the numbers compared to 14 years ago are exponentially larger. In a month from now, they're going to be exponentially even larger than that. Because we are growing stronger with every attempt at silencing us. So, today, 119, the mirror of 9/11, a day that there are still people indoctrinated that think that 3 airline jets were flown into buildings and 1 was crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. There are still people that think that those buildings came down without detonation. There are still people who think that the Muslims did it. There are still people who have not spent an hour looking at the possibility that their perception of that event might be wrong. And yet criticize me, who has spent countless hours studying that fateful morning and asking the questions, cui bono? Who benefits? Who benefits financially? Who benefits via power? Who benefits via agenda? Why do things happen? Who are the ones responsible? Bill Cooper once said that he refuses to believe that the course of our civilization is guided by accident. No. The course of our civilization has been guided by people in power who choose to create events that steer us one way or another. They choose to steer us into war. They choose to steer us into poverty, into famine, into genocide. They choose to steer us exactly the way they so choose. And they get together and they strategize and they plan and they do it over generations of family bloodlines. And what's so exciting about this moment in time right now is that we are on the precipice of a world, a planet, without those people that have enslaved humanity for generations. And as we stand at that precipice, when it happens, how it happens, in terms of the exposure of these people, I know not how, when, or where. I just know that it's happening. And I know it's going to continue to happen because we're awake. You can't put us back to sleep. There is no stopping humanity when humanity is faced with an extinction, is faced with a realization of servitude, is faced with a realization of corruption by the people that are supposed to be serving us. And when humanity awakens to the atrocities that are being done to our children, the several thousand children that go missing on this planet every single day. Every single day, thousands of children are stolen and transported by the people that many think are being inaugurated tomorrow. All of those people represent, okay? This is the Fourth Reich. And if you watched my Fourth Reich video done probably 2 years ago, you would know that the Third Reich never ended, it just changed flags. With names like Watson of IBM, with names like Bush of Brown and Company financing IG Farben, with names like Gates, Senior and Junior, with names like Werner von Braun, bringing rocket technology to the U.S. Experiments with human beings was brought to the U.S. through Operation Paperclip. What people fail to realize is the same people that murdered that man right there, and the same people that murdered his brother and his son are in power today, save for Donald John Trump. He's the only thing, the only person that stands in the way of those people. Did you read a nice Martin Luther King quote yesterday and feel good about yourself? Huh? Did you share a Martin Luther King quote and feel good about yourself, and then turn on CNN and see what they had to say about him, and see the interviews of the people that are propping themselves up on his ashes? Because I got some news for you. The same people that murdered Martin Luther King are still in power today. Or at least they were up until 2016. But they're about to get back in power tomorrow with the inauguration of a false candidate who never even won the election. Why do you think Facebook fact checks that statement? Why do you think Twitter fact checks any statement made that challenges the election? Do you understand the level of tyranny that we have reached when our voices are silenced behind censorship and, what's worse, masks? We have allowed this to occur. We turn off those channels, those stations that censor us, that lie to us. But there are many people that are still locked into the matrix, and they have no idea they're even in it. Why? Well, one reason might be that people like me and you, who try to awaken our families, our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers to what we have discovered, almost as if we were in a tribe together way back in the jungle, way back in the day, and we sat around the campfire and we talked about what we experienced that day, and we got a download from our elders. And it comes my turn, and I raise my hand, and I say, hey, listen, there's a sinkhole about 100 yards that way that I almost fell into. Okay? I put some sticks up around it, but everyone, especially you kids playing, don't play over in that area until we figure that situation out, because you'll hurt yourself. Why would anybody in that tribe not believe me when I'm trying to warn them of something? Maybe I have an agenda. Maybe I want to keep that area to myself. Maybe I don't want to share that space. So maybe that's where I go but here's the thing. You fail to take into account the person behind the warning. You fail to take into account that the person warning you about that is the same person that cooks you dinner and brings you a cold beer or brings you flowers from the garden. We fail to realize that that person that's trying to warn us about that situation, we've spent time with. They've made us laugh, made us cry. We've had great experiences together. Because they'd rather listen to people who have been given a false credibility. They've been propped up on a pedestal, propped up on this false narration that they are credible because they've got a suit and a tie on, and they got cameras, they've got teleprompters, and lights, camera, makeup, action. They're actors. And yet people would rather believe them than their neighbor or their friend that they have actually built and established trust with. So what happens when you finally realize that we were right about that sinkhole and that we weren't saying it because we had an ulterior motive, but we were saying it because we actually care about our fellow man and we want to warn them about what's ahead? And so as many of us strive through social network, through phone calls, through texts, to alert our fellow human beings about things that are happening, we are met with conflict, with discounting. But soon, that will all change, because the truth can't be kept down. And what you're about to see exposed is going to change the world. And it's going to shatter people's lives. Because people are going to realize that this whole time they've been asleep at the wheel, while the people they support, through paying for their movies, through watching the Oscars, through watching the news, through paying for cable television, through buying a newspaper subscription, through buying XM radio so that they can listen to the radio, who donate to NPR. Because what you're about to realize is that all of those conduits to information led to a propaganda that kept the truth away from you and I about the people that should be in prison or worse, and yet instead live in mansions. This isn't a socioeconomic argument. This is a reality argument about the people involved in various nefarious activities involving children that you are about to be exposed to. Now let's talk about when. When will we be vindicated for telling everybody about the sinkhole? Many of us would like to think, would have liked to have had it happen a month ago, 2 months ago, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Me, I would have liked to have seen it happen about 13 years ago. Because that was probably about the time people were like, all right, he's lost. He's off his rocker. And it was also about the time that I realized what was really happening to people, children on this planet. And so I would have liked to have seen it happen a long time ago. Think about the military that has sacrificed so much for this country, for their family, for themselves, for their God, for their core, that would have liked to have seen this happen a long time ago, before they lost their innocence, before they were thrust into wars, which this president has not done and has not gotten an ounce of credit for keeping us out of wars. Do you think the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower talked about in his farewell address, you saw President Trump's farewell address today? Maybe we should watch President Eisenhower's farewell address that warned us about the secret societies and the military-industrial complex. Do you think the military-industrial complex wants another 4 years of Donald Trump, who hasn't gotten us into one war? Do you think the Rothschilds want Donald Trump? Do you think the people that have been in control of this planet for generations liked having Donald Trump in there? Isn't that obvious? He's got a model, beautiful wife who wasn't graced on one cover of a fashion magazine in 4 years, who was the only first lady who was ever on them before she was first lady, simply because of her beauty. And here we have a woman of class, of distinction, of intelligence, who's raising her child and being a great representative of our country, who gets disrespected because you can't get over the fact that Donald Trump doesn't speak like you'd like him to speak. So when does this happen? When does this all come to fruition? If I was writing this movie, and I've made movies before, and I've written movies before, and I've edited movies before, so that I could actually edit it and make it and massage it and create it and write it in a way that the movie built up to this climactic event, this climactic moment in the story where the audience cheered. Yeah, yeah, woohoo! The greatest thing about making movies is making that movie and then listening to people's reaction to it as they watch it. We have been told to enjoy the show. What we haven't really wrapped our head around is that this is a show. Because 17 said, you can't tell them, you must show them. And if anything was truer that could be proven by you and I in our attempt to communicate verbally, passionately with our loved ones, what is happening, we know that to be true. So the solution cannot be to tell them. The solution must be to show them. You and I are not privy to the level that this society must be shown these things. From a timeline standpoint, we would like these events to be shown before Joe Biden takes his hand off that Bible tomorrow. Because once he takes his hand off that Bible, he has become the president of the United States corporation created in 1871, but not the group of states that were created in 1776. If Joe Biden becomes the 46th president of the United States corporation, and that is dissolved because it must be dissolved. See, we can't go on with a corporation as our country, because within that corporation we have lost our constitutional rights, because the Constitution was changed as well. And when you are chattel, when you are a Social Security number as a part of a almost like a barcode of a piece of inventory of a corporation, you have no rights. So the corporation created in 1871 and further propped up by the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, the Social Security Act of 1933, the taking away of silver from humanity, of precious metals that were backing currency and making our currency fiat currency, and making the Federal Reserve, allowing the Federal Reserve to lend money and get interest on that money that they lend to us. That corporation must be destroyed. So whether or not that corporation is destroyed before, during, or after the inauguration, it must happen for us to be sovereign, free beings on this planet, and for us to break the chain of central banks that is absolutely controlled by the Rothschilds and the Vatican. That must be break the chain worldwide so people are free. Because as long as you are a debt slave, you are a slave. And you and I are debt slaves. A child born yesterday owes the federal government over $60,000, and I'm sure that number is much, much higher, that they will have to pay throughout their lifetime as that number grows exponentially, because every dollar created in that system is a debt instrument that is lended to humanity and to banks, and the people that make it out of thin air, create it out of thin air and lend that, they're the ones that get that money. So this corporation must be destroyed once and for all and exposed for what it did to our humanity and what it did for those who were actively involved, the family bloodlines that were actively involved in getting us to that point. They have made hundreds of trillions of dollars on a conservative basis off the enslavement of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. So, Joe Biden, who, ask yourself, why haven't any arrests been made? We know who he is. We know he's bought and paid for by China. That's obvious. If you voted for Joe Biden, you cannot argue against that. You understand that, right? If you voted for Joe Biden, you cannot argue facts of Joe Biden and his son flying to China on Air Force Two, and 10 days later his son has a Wall Street firm that doesn't have any money, and all of a sudden it has $1.5 billion from the Chinese Communist Party. You can't hide the fact that Joe was partners with his son and some other people with the head of CEFC, the CCP-owned oil company. You cannot hide the fact that his son, who is a crackhead and worthless other than being Joe's son, got millions from Burisma, and then Joe threatened to withhold $1 billion if they kept investigating Burisma and his son. You can't argue those facts. Doesn't matter how bad you think Orange Man bad is. You can't argue the fact of a corrupt career politician whose only claim to fame is enslaving our brothers and sisters of color in 1988 and 1994 with his crime bills. In 88, enslaving the inner city minorities when his son had a crack addiction himself and never did time. So this is your candidate. The creepy Joe the way he handles young girls and young boys, and his history and his ownership of an island across the water from Epstein Island, of his absolute his absolute lack of ability to communicate. This man is about to be inaugurated, and those who are excited about that, those who are for the inauguration of Joe Biden as 46th President of the United States of America, don't have a clue who he is. They don't have a clue of his record. So for the first time in our history, the clear delineation between sane and insane has been drawn. But the problem is those that are supporting the insane, those that are voting for the insane, those who are absolutely not doing their own homework outside of the mainstream propaganda, which is the only thing that props up this candidate. They think we're insane. And so, thus the division. So if it's before, here's what I think is going down. And again, we focus on comms from 17, from POTUS, and recently from Pompeo, also from Scavino. And we are referred back constantly to the almost 5,017 drops that have been dropped from 4chan, then they compromised that. 8chan, then they shut that down. And finally 8kun, which has been in all the various places that are gathering those drops, like QAlerts.app, QAG.news, and these have been shut down. Why? Why is the mainstream media consistently discredited the 17 movement? Because the 17 movement is exposing not only the people that mainstream media's job it is to protect, but 17 has exposed mainstream media, period, for the propaganda, mockingbird media. Again, this is an actual disclosed program by the CIA to infiltrate our media for purposes of propaganda. That actually came out. Now you have it a little bit more blatant. You actually have Jeff Bezos, the richest man on the planet. Not really. He's not even close to the Rothschilds, to the Rockefellers, not even close. And yet, he buys the Washington Post. Meanwhile, buying the Washington Post for what, $350 million? He got a $640 million contract from the CIA for cloud computing. Imagine that. And this is the guy that's shutting down Parler and Apple and Twitter and all these other organizations that are shutting down the ability for you and I to communicate freely. So, how's this going to go down? Well, there are 3 times more troops in Washington, D.C. than we have in Afghanistan. 10 times more. Did I say 3 or 10? 10 times more troops in our nation's capital than we have in Afghanistan. And another 30,000 troops around the United States that are deployed in the National Guard. Why? We've already seen that the attack on the Capitol, which I was there, we've already seen that they let them in. There's video of them letting them in. There's video of police being complicit with the whole thing. We know that some of those people were Antifa and BLM, dressed as Trump supporters. This has already come out. But the mainstream media isn't going to let you see it, and big tech is going to censor me for trying to tell you about it. So all of these troops really is for the protection of Joe Biden, who, by the way, has asked for them to be vetted. So they're going down through the National Guard, our military, and checking their social profile. And if they like President Trump, they're not allowed to be there. I have a feeling that that's going to be a skeleton crew by the time that's said and done. But here's what I believe. I don't think those troops are there. I don't think they've engaged 2,000 National Guard troops as sworn in as U.S. Marshals so that they can protect the people that are going to be inside that fence. I think that certainly U.S. Marshals, their responsibility can be to protect the judiciary, judges and lawyers, which we've heard the JAG is being called into D.C. as well. And they are there to protect possible diplomats or possible politicians. But their job is basically cross commission from military to civilian and back and forth. And with the civilian, they are able to serve warrants. Do you remember 220 some thousand warrants that 17 has told us about that are sealed and ready for deployment? So U.S. Marshals can serve warrants, make arrests, transport prisoners, and they can handle assets. Because if you look at President Trump's executive order of 1221, where people who have engaged, businesses who have engaged with human trafficking, and you'd be surprised how many have. Folks, it takes a lot to move 2,000 children a day in this country alone. By the way, it helps if we have open borders and they're just streaming through. That's why the left wants open borders, because they're a part of it. They're a part of the human trafficking, many of them. So here you have this human trafficking that President Trump signed an executive order that if you're shown to be human trafficking, we will seize your assets. So the U.S. Marshals, National Guard, the 2,000 people can now do that. So is the Capitol, with a fence around it, with the barbed wire that stops people coming from either direction, with the bolts holding the fences together facing the outside, I don't think that's a mistake. It's not a mistake you make. It may be a mistake you make on 2 or 3 fences caught together, and then they come over and say, dude, it's the bolts are supposed to be on the other side. So they, because if it's on this side, you can unscrew the bolts and go through the fence. It makes the fence meaningless. Meanwhile, the people on the other side of the fence in the Capitol, they are literally surrounded by a wall and 30,000 guns. Actually, 60,000 guns, because every single National Guard member most likely has 2, a rifle and a pistol. 60,000 guns protect, and a wall protect the very people that are saying we should have less police, we should defund the police, we should defund the military. You should not be able to own guns, the kind of guns that our military are carrying. And building a wall is division. It's not good. It's not humanitarian. No, it's humanitarian, because building that wall on the southern border has reduced human trafficking exponentially. But the mainstream media won't tell you that, because they are lying through their teeth to support an agenda that they are told to continue to spew. So is tomorrow a way to round up all the bad players and have them in one place and start releasing the information that is finally going to get the rest of humanity on board with the reality of who these people are? Because who these people are on a good day, on a day when they don't do anything wrong, cannot be compared to Donald John Trump. And this is not a perfect man. And this is not a man that I blindly carry water for. This is a man who I have supported because he was from the outside, because he was not a part of the swamp. Maybe he was involved in a swamp in New York in real estate. That doesn't affect me. I wanted a president that was going to be able to take on the very people that I've been trying to tell my tribe were dangerous and demented and satanic and pedophiles for over a decade. And since he's been in office, he has proven to me that he is committed to that, committed to stopping human trafficking, stopping children's innocence from being stripped from them. And that has been everything to me. The fact that he's done amazing things in addition to our economy and for the minorities and for women and for just, oh my God, all the things that you haven't been exposed to if you are in the mainstream media matrix, because they can't allow that information to get out, because if they do, the people that they and the people they work for are going to prison, or worse, are going to be executed for their crimes against humanity. The Bushes, who liberals could not stand and were warning me about and other people about, and I finally started listening, which is when I woke up to who the Bushes were. they're okay if the Bushes speak negatively about Donald Trump, because the Bushes now agree with them. And the Bushes are horrible human beings. George Herbert Walker Bush assassinated President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. He was a part of the conspiracy to assassinate this man. And that's what we know. 3 different things put him in Dallas that morning. 2 phone calls and a photograph. And his rise up through the CIA as a result into the vice presidency and into the presidency. This is all coming out. And yet you'll get behind them when they bash Donald Trump. And George W., are you kidding me? He was the tool that they used for 9/11. We need Donald John Trump for 2 more years, 4 more years, however many more years, if for no other reason that we need to get to the bottom of the flags that they have created to force us into compliance for going to war and sending our children to war. So if I'm writing this script, 2 things. 1, they're all in the cage. We've got them all. We've got the evidence of their wrongdoing. We've got, I believe, already video testimony of their wrongdoing, video confessions of their wrongdoing, and we've all got them in there. And why am I not afraid that they hear this and they say, oh, I'm not going in that cage? Because they have to go in that cage. Either because they have to go get the presidency, or because they're forced into there for the show, to show the world, the waiting, watching world, that they have been criminals this entire time. And so they either grab them before the inauguration, or after he pulls his hand off that Bible, the shoplifter has finally left the store. All the shoplifters have left the store, and now we go arrest them. Is Joe Biden still in the store with the things in his pockets and we cannot arrest him yet? Does he need to have that sworn in for them all to be complicit, all to be conspiratorial in the fraudulent election of Joseph Biden? Once he is in that presidential role, they are all guilty of treason. And they get arrested, and then we see the real evidence to support those arrests. That's option 2. Both of those options are going to come back from the populace that is not a fan of Donald Trump and say that he did this coup. The military did this coup, even though Trump will be separated from it all, and it will be military run. It will be a military operation. The military will come back, or the people will come back and say it was a coup against a viable president, a legitimate candidate, a legitimate president. And that's where they'll be wrong. However, the proof, if it's shown in that moment, you must know that is going to be so overwhelming that that question won't be able to be posed. That challenge will not be able to be posed. So overwhelming. And the one overwhelming thing that will erase any challenge of what goes down is human trafficking. And we know they're involved. And I believe that 17, the NSA, the military intelligence absolutely has evidence for all of that. Now, if they don't have that evidence, might they need to see this play out a little bit? Why are all these documents? Why are the DNI being released? Why is the FBI, the Crossfire Hurricane? Why is that being released on the morning of the inauguration of the 46th President of the United States? Why did he wait? Trump and 17 have been 17 steps ahead of the people that wish to take them out every step of the way, including watching live from the Eisenhower building as the election unfolded. They were watching live. They were monitoring the corruption. They were monitoring the ballot harvesting. They've got it all. So why haven't they exposed that yet? Do they need the shoplifter to leave the store by him taking his hand off that Bible after being sworn in? That's the question. Okay? And if they don't believe that the population has seen enough, the only reason I can possibly imagine that they allow that man and that woman to step foot in the White House under the guise of president of this corporation is if they then dump all this information out into the public and we watch how they react to it. And we watch them prosecute themselves. That's the only reason I could see for delaying this any longer beyond the moment of inauguration tomorrow. And when this happens, when the arrests are made, we've got to get, they've got to get mainstream media out of the way, because mainstream media is going to try to do this, and then they come directly at us with the EAM, Emergency Action. Why do I get that wrong all the time? Message, the Emergency Action Message. Okay, that's ready to go. So then do we go dark then? And then we see hours of programming every day directly related to these treasonous players in this movie. That would be the climax. Hand on the Bible, hand off the Bible, military arrests for treason against you and me, which we've seen not a mountain of evidence for, but a mountain range of evidence for. We dissolve the corporation of the United States of America that has enslaved us, and we go back to the 1776 republic. We are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. And we will go back to the 1776, our Constitution, our sovereignty, our freedom of speech, our freedom of religion, our freedom to bear arms, our freedom to not have our persons inspected or our persons violated without due cause or due process, like we have to do every single time we fly on an airplane. We're going to have medical freedom. We're going to have new technologies emerging that have been buried by the very people that are controlling this planet. We're going to have Nasara and Jasara, which is we're going to get our money back from the corrupt and bankers that have enslaved humanity since 1913 in the United States and other countries with their central banks. That is our money. And there are hundreds and hundreds of trillions of dollars. We are going to go back to asset-backed currency so that we can't have this system abused again, and so that we don't have inflation of fiat currency occurring, making it harder and harder and harder to survive, which is exactly where we are now. We are entering what I believe to be a new paradigm, and I am hopeful that it begins tomorrow. And I am hopeful that after the corporation is collapsed, that we then vote for Donald John Trump to be our next president of the Republic, which would be the 19th president to follow Ulysses S. Grant. That is my hope for humanity. And that is what I believe is going to happen. And if it doesn't happen tomorrow, which I think is a perfect opportunity, I still know it's going to. Because 17, with 5,000 information drops through the Socratic method, has asked us to engage in this process of learning, of teaching ourselves about what's really happening on this planet. And you can discard it all you want, but if you discard it, I will tell you this, that you have no idea who, what, where, how 17 evolved and what's involved now. Because I have seen the future of what is coming because of 17's communication to us. And 17 has engaged us in this process. 17 has engaged us in this process because 17 needs, and POTUS need, our collective consciousness, and the military, by the way. They're a big part of this. They need our collective conscious to actually see this happening, because we can manifest our future. We can manifest the next level of our evolution rising up from this revolution. And also, what I believe and what I hope to see and pray to see is a very few casualties through this process. That I never imagined a revolution of humanity to rise up against its oppressors without having a tremendous amount of casualties. But when you have a man that has the military capable of the type of genocide that we saw in the 20th century by following orders, when you have that military that supports the man who is fighting for you and I, that comes from a very different place. And that is something that I can wrap my head around and my heart around and my prayers around. To pray for the people that are fighting and operating for you and me versus the corporate oligarchs that have been controlling humanity as long as we've been alive, and much longer. My name is David Snedeker. This is the Indoctrination, where we expose the indoctrination so that we can shatter the indoctrination and enter a whole new paradigm of humanity on this earth. And I look forward to stepping into that humanity with you. And we are well over 2,000 beautiful humans here in the studio. And I haven't done this in a while, but I'm going to ask you to do this. I'm going to stop this broadcast right now, and I'm going to ask you to share that message out far and wide. And then I'm going to start back up with another broadcast and have Todd and Cindy on with us and have a little chat about a few things, maybe take some questions and go down a few communication holes that we've received today. And I ask you to all come back to this place where you were at just now and give me I'll give you some time to share this out. I ask you to do that because especially with so many voices that are being snuffed right now and being censored, it's important to get this type of information out. So I ask you to do that, and I will be with you shortly.